Brad Pitt stopped at the threshold of the bank, dressed in a simple yet expensive suit, with a subtle hint of luxury he was accustomed to displaying. However, today his heart was beating faster. He didn't have enough money to pay for his apartment rent. Of course, he could have reached out to his friends or managers, but he didn't want them to know about his financial troubles. So, he decided to withdraw the necessary amount on his own. Inside, it was quiet, with only the faint hum of the air conditioner breaking the stillness. The service window was open, and he approached it, handing his card to the bank employee. The worker looked at Brad like any regular customer and began entering the details. "Amount to withdraw?" the man asked. $1,500, please, Brad replied, trying to stay calm. The bank employee looked at the screen, then turned his gaze back to Brad with a slight hint of disbelief. "You don't have enough funds for this withdrawal," he said. Brad froze in place, momentarily hearing a ringing in his head. This was impossible. He always kept track of his finances. Yet today, it turned out his account was empty. The feeling of inevitable defeat washed over him, but he didn't panic. He fumbled for his card in his pocket and thought that maybe it wasn't as bad as it seemed. He just needed to contact the bank and resolve the issue. As soon as he left the bank, a few police officers appeared in his path, stopping him with a merciless expression on their faces. They had no idea who they were stopping and didn't even realize that a celebrity was standing before them. Brad Pitt, realizing it was just a coincidence, briefly felt like an ordinary person among the crowd. "Please step over here." One of the officers took him by the arm, not bothering to be gentle. "What's going on?" Brad asked, trying to stay calm. "You might be connected to the recent incident on the street," one of the officers said, taking his time to explain what it was about. Brad thought this could be a mistake, but he realized that it would be difficult to explain anything to these people. Calmly, without sudden movements, he allowed them to lead him to the patrol car. During the ride to the police station, Brad tried to figure out how he had ended up in such a situation. However, every minute spent in the police car only convinced him more that even the most famous people could find themselves on the edge. Only after a while did he realize they didn't know who he was. And this, in turn, became his chance to change the course of events. At the police station, Brad sat in the corner of the room, observing the calm bustle around him. The officers were taking statements, exchanging comments and documents. His presence didn't concern anyone. They were all following the usual routine, ignoring who this man was. Brad sat silently, trying to understand what had happened and how he could get out of this situation. "Do you know what the charges are?" one of the officers finally asked as he approached him. Brad looked at him. He felt that this was no longer just an unfortunate inconvenience. It was a chance, maybe even an opportunity, to change something. He wasn't a criminal. It was just a misunderstanding, and all he needed to do was talk. "No, I don't know. But this is probably just a mistake." "I'm Brad Pitt," he said, trying to remain calm, though he could feel the tension rising inside. The officer looked at him, seemingly unsure how to respond. "Brad Pitt? Are you serious?" he asked with some doubt. Brad nodded. "It may seem strange, but do you have any documents to verify my identity?" The officer hesitated, then decided it was better to check. He took out his phone and began searching the database while Brad quietly sat, once again reflecting on the situation. Soon, the officer returned with news. "It seems it really is you," he said, a little embarrassed. "Sorry for this incident. You're free to go." But Brad didn't rush. "Can I have a minute?" he asked, slightly raising his voice. The officer looked at him with interest. "What do you mean?" "Do you know what happens when an ordinary person finds themselves in a situation like this? When they can't just walk away. When they're detained for no reason, with no public opinion, and everyone thinks they're just another wrong person who has no right to defense. Why do you think that is?" The officer was taken aback, but Brad continued, not giving him a chance to respond. "I'm not blaming you. But I understand how hard it is to make the right decisions when you have stereotypes defining who's who. What if you have to realize that you're not always on the right side? Not always knowing who you're dealing with? And now maybe you're looking at me as just another bad guy. But what if I'm just a person who accidentally ended up in this situation? What if you simply made a mistake? The officer paused for a moment, and in his eyes there was a flash of understanding, although not fully. He placed his notebook on the table. "Maybe you're right," he replied quietly in a lower tone. "I apologize for this." Brad nodded, trying to leave behind the understanding that this very moment might be the beginning of change. He was sure that not everything was lost, even if he was just an ordinary person who had fallen into a police trap. He left the station without a sense of defeat, only with hope. In a world where people are often judged by their appearance or status, moments like these, when someone stops to figure out the truth, can start the process of change. Brad once again felt how important it was to act calmly, even when things weren't going as planned. This was the first step toward changing something in this world. And maybe his small action would signal others. Brad stepped out of the police station, observing the fast-paced city life continuing unchanged around him. Not everyone had the time to stop and think about the details. He remembered his business, his store, his true goal, to check if everything was really working as it should. But it felt more like fighting against artificial walls created by societal norms. His phone rang. It was his business partner, Jason. "Brad, where are you? I feel like something's wrong. You haven't been answering calls. Why aren't you in the office?" "Listen, I just had a conversation with the police," Brad replied, trying not to let any nervousness slip into his voice. "It was just a misunderstanding. But I'm not done with my check yet." "They detained you?" Jason caught the moment and was clearly concerned. "You mean this isn't just your idea of checking the store?" "Yeah, of course," Brad answered with a hint of irony. "But you know, sometimes a situation requires more than just another check. You have no idea how much can be changed if you just put yourself in someone else's shoes." Jason paused. He was prepared for anything, but not for this philosophical moment from Brad. "You don't mean to say you've changed your mind about all this, right? This is business, Brad. We need to stick to the plan." "Jason, I know what you're getting at. But what you call the plan might also be someone else's plan. I can't be part of a system that works blindly, forgetting about people. We're not just selling products. We need to matter to those who choose us. It's not just numbers on a screen." And in that moment, as Brad ended the call with Jason, he realized one thing. This wasn't just a store check. It was a check of everything he had done up until then. He returned home late in the evening. The quiet sadness surrounded his apartment. He sat at the table and began writing his thoughts on paper. He needed to change his strategy, change his approach, take the business to a new level. But was he ready for that? All these reflections brought him back to the initial question. Was it really just about conquering the market, or was there something more in this fight than just money? What do you do when you no longer want to walk the beaten path? Over time, Brad understood. He needed to find a new way of doing business, and this new path would require more than just strategy. It would be a path where every action and every step had to be morally justified. His plans were changing, and this very situation at the police station had become a signal for those changes. Brad couldn't stop thinking about his conversation with Jason. His words about the plan and the system lingered in his mind like a ringing in his ears. He understood that business was more than just numbers on a balance sheet. His enterprise had to be something more than just another mechanism serving society. He had to break this routine and find meaning in every decision he made. The next morning, Brad headed to meet the same banker who had helped him with withdrawing the money. Though he was still shaken from the incident, he felt that he needed to continue what he had started. Various thoughts swirled in his mind about how to change the system, how to avoid becoming part of this soulless machine. Upon arriving at the bank, Brad immediately noticed the atmosphere. Everything felt carefree, as if this bank were an inseparable part of a vast system where there was no room for doubt. A row of employees working in one of the offices were reviewing documents, signing papers one by one. But Brad wasn't here to blindly sign anything. "Hey, John, how's it going?" Brad greeted the man who had helped him last time. "Oh, Brad, as you can see, a bit busy, but all good," the banker replied, pointing to his desk piled with papers. "What can I do for you?" Brad sat down on a chair, looking at John. His expression turned serious, and John immediately noticed this. "I want to do something more, John. I can't be part of a system that makes people cling to every penny instead of letting them feel alive. My company is more than just money. I want it to be a platform for change. I want it to show people how to truly live." John paused. He wasn't prepared for such deep thoughts from Brad. He knew him as a successful businessman who always chased results. But this seemed different. "Are you serious? You want your company to be something like a social experiment?" John asked, surprised. "Yes, I want people to feel that they're valued not just as consumers, but as human beings, as individuals," Brad replied, raising an eyebrow. "Change doesn't start with big steps. It starts with small, quiet changes in everyday actions. If we can show this through our actions, maybe someone else will see it and take that path." John looked a little puzzled. He was a banker, and although he understood what Brad meant, it was hard for him to imagine how this could be implemented practically. "And you mean your company will be more about emotions, about people, not about profit?" he asked, trying to understand. "Exactly," Brad answered. "I want everyone who works in my stores to feel that they're doing something important, that they're not just being used as a tool for profit. It's about creating an atmosphere where people can be themselves, where they feel that they're not just selling products, but giving a piece of themselves." John was silent for a moment before responding. "I get it, but it's not that simple. You're talking about something global. It will require a lot of changes in the structure of the business itself." Brad sighed. "I know, but if I don't start, then who will? I believe that even one person can change how a whole system works. And you know what? I'm ready to take the risk. I can't just sit back and watch it all continue. This has to be the start of something bigger." John looked at him with understanding. "You're right. Maybe we can help with this. Let's do it, Brad." These words became the beginning of something new. Brad was ready for the fight, but this time he knew that change wouldn't come through harshness or aggression. It would come through understanding and mutual respect, through every small step they would take together. A few months later, Brad and John were able to bring their idea to life. It was a complete transformation, not only for the business, but for everyone connected to the company. They started small, organizing training sessions for their employees, where they taught them not only how to sell, but also how to interact with people, understand their needs. Instead of the usual motivational lectures about achieving financial goals, they held sessions on emotional intelligence, the importance of mutual respect and compassion. Brad applied the new approach to their advertising strategy. They began working with real stories of people who used their products, creating videos and social media posts about how their business had changed the lives of ordinary people. They raised important social issues, such as supporting the underprivileged, environmental protection, and inclusivity. As time passed, it became clear that their approach was paying off. The salespeople in the stores became more welcoming. Customers felt valued, not just used. Products sold not only because of their quality, but also due to the connection that had been built between the brand and people. The company became recognized not only for its financial achievements, but also for its impact on social change. On the day Brad returned to the bank to sign another important contract, he felt pride. It wasn't just the success of the business. It was the success of bringing an idea to life that once seemed impossible. John, who had become his partner in these changes, greeted him with a smile. "I'm glad you didn't give up," John said, extending his hand. Brad shook it firmly. "This is just the beginning. We can change even more," he replied, realizing that true change doesn't start with grand plans, but with small, everyday actions. And so, their business continued to thrive, changing not only the market, but the lives of those who were part of this new movement. Brad felt that, in the end, everything he had done mattered, because it was about people. And that was what he had been searching for all his life.